Are you going? Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Redistricting Advisory Committee meeting for Wednesday, October 27th, 2021. This meeting is scheduled to go until 8:30 tonight, if necessary, as are our remaining meetings. We have a timeline to meet, and I'm sure we're going to do that. Would the clerk call the roll?
Thank you, Chairman Sweet.
Sweet, here.
Mr. Garibaldi.
Here.
Mr. Jorgensen. Ms. Fisher, Mr. Rocca. Present. Mr. Inyart. Vice Chairman Anderson. Ms. Thompson. Mr. Byrne.
Here.
Mr. Baracco.
Here.
Ms. Houghton. Mr. Dell. Mr. Patton. Ms. Heisenbuttel. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Would everyone please rise and join me in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, approval of the agenda. The chair would like to add an item after the public matters. I've asked the county council to come tonight and make a short presentation with respect to our process, if that's okay with the committee. Any objections? And we'll add that agenda item there. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved. Seconded.
Moved. Been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. We'll move on to item number 4, approval of the October 20 minutes. You all received those via email. I believe there's been a correction. You want to read that correction? Do you have that available?
Thank you. It was just adding one word, team, to the minutes.
Didn't
Team
Ann have a
visualization.
phrase that she was adding?
The minutes reflected, shared their rationale, and demonstrated team visualizations to the committee, and Ms. Heisenbuttel added the word team before visualizations.
Okay.
That's been done.
If there's no objection, we'll add that change. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Garibaldi, seconded by Andy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion passes. I'd like to welcome everybody that's on Zoom. Thank you very much for attending tonight. We're going to... Sorry, what was that? Okay. Public matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone wish to address the council with any item that is not on the agenda? Please limit your conversation to 5 minutes or less. Zoom members? Hearing none, seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to the next item. After I went home, after the last meeting, Mr. Ruslan had emailed all of us the 3 plans that we had talked about. And I was sitting there ruminating over them, and I was looking at one of them, playing with it, and we have not made any, well, then I started thinking, what are the requirements that we have to meet? And so I started looking up through the pages of the webinars that we saw earlier, the 2 webinars, one from RCRC and one from the National Legislative Council of Legislators or something. And I came across some pages which had some interesting phrases, to me anyway, that had to do with incumbents. We've never once talked about incumbents, or which I think is an item that's, we're going to have to discuss at some point, but we hadn't up until then. And we haven't avoided it so much as it's not in one of the 5 criteria. And so I met with county council and county administrator to get a little more information. So I've asked Greg to come tonight to explain or to flesh out, just the requirements, what we can and can't do, or what we might or might not do. So Greg, if you could do that, please.
Sure. Is it fine for me to be here, or do you want me to go to the podium, or however you want?
You're fine right there.
Okay.
It's fine.
So I'm going to start with the presumption that you're already familiar with the 5 criteria that's in the state code in AB 849. Well, there's really 7 categories. There's 2 that come from federal law about equal population and dealing with race, and then the 5 that the state has identified in rank order. And the specific question was related to other criteria and whether you can consider other criteria, one being basically doubling up of incumbents, or other criteria like, keeping the core of existing districts together, because if you change districts a lot, you could have people who were expecting to vote in this next cycle who may not vote in the next cycle because now they're 2 years further out. And so those other criteria, while they're not listed in the statute that you have to base the map on, as long as, so the answer is yes. I think you can consider those other criteria as long as they don't conflict with any of the mandatory criteria. So by talking about doubling up of incumbents, if you split what you deem to be a community of interest, that would be a violation. You couldn't do that. But if everything else is ticked off, and then you say, well, we can draw a variety of maps, some that keep incumbents, some that don't keep incumbents, with everything else sort of checked off, you can start weighing those other factors. So the state level redistricting committee in the Constitution, it specifically says that that committee cannot consider the addresses of incumbents or candidates. The statute related to counties that you're applying just says you have to consider these things when you're doing a map. It doesn't exclude other criteria. There's federal case law from the U.S. Supreme Court that says sort of avoiding putting incumbents together is a valid criteria. So again, as long as you're not violating or sort of trumping any of those mandatory categories, you can look at those things. Short answer. So that was the specific question. If you,
that's correct.
Yeah.
That's the question that I had, and that applies to the Board of Supervisors when we forward our recommendations and they wish to, when they're investigating or evaluating and or changing or doing their own, they have to meet those same criteria.
yes. Whatever map is approved would have to meet all those, couldn't violate those criteria.
Anyone have any, thank you, Greg. Anyone have any questions for Greg, clarifications or anything with respect to how we can move forward on that? Okay. So,
could you put up the 4th of the files that I sent to you?
Let me pull up.
It's the CSAC file.
Are we looking for something?
Which one was it, Don?
The one that's labeled CSAC, 29. 29, they're all numbered at the end.
Oh. Wait. Oh, there it is. Sorry.
And according to CSAC, on the webinar that we all went through, AB 849, according to them, specifically says to not include incumbents or candidates as a community of interest. Also, according to RCRC, on page 28, the previous page, they say consideration of incumbency is now restricted. And you are right in that the law actually says that the 5 priorities, and they are ranked in priorities, are requirements of the state. And other things can be considered as long as they don't interfere with those first 5 priorities. But those first 5 have to be met first, correct?
Yes, that's, I think, what I said.
Good, thank you.
But so incumbency is not in the 5, right? It can't be
Correct,
anything that trumps those other ones. And it's specifically made not to be a community of interest. So I can't say my community of interest is, wanting to be with Supervisor Smith.
Right.
That's not a community of interest. But if you go through all those 5 and you make a map, I mean, you could, so theoretically, you make a map that meets all those criteria and changes everything. And you can potentially make a map that meets all the criteria and changes very little.
Right.
Those are both valid maps, and I think you can consider.
As long as they meet the compactness. I mean, if
as long as
what we're looking at here is, the previous boundaries lacked something in compactness. And in order to, and I don't even know where the supervisors live. I'm not trying to map anyone in or out of any district. I just think that the first 5 criteria are the primary ones, and after that, then the chips kind of fall where they may.
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't seen any maps. I asked a question about whether you can consider that. And I think at the end, after you've complied with all those the mandatory criteria, if you can make a map that is consistent with those, you can start considering these other.
Oh, I agree. I actually made a map that meets all the criteria very nicely and combines Kirkwood with Plymouth. But it meets all the criteria, and the number of maps that you can come up with is almost infinite. But the criteria, as stated by the law, are continuity, geographic integrity, preservation of cities and census-designated places. They are considered equal, easily identifiable natural and artificial boundaries, and compactness. Those are the 5 prioritized criteria that were required by law to work with, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But you can consider those other factors if and when.
Once you meet all those.
As long as you're not in conflict with any of those criteria.
Thank you, Mr. Gillott. Any other questions? All right. I'd like to propose, also for your consideration, something for you to think about. We're gonna have 7 or 8 maps. We may have 10 or 12 maps. I don't know how many we're gonna have. Right now, we saw 3 last time. I think we're gonna try to look at 4 tonight, if we can get through all 4. Over the next meeting or so, we might have more. We don't have anything from the citizens yet. We may hear after tonight from someone. But we're gonna end up having to pare those down. So my suggestion is that we look at each of them individually, talk about them, give the group an opportunity who put them together, the individual, the opportunity to put them together, to go back and respond to the criteria or the criticism or the critique, tweak it, whatever. And then we'll come back after we've done all that, probably at the next meeting, and bring up 3 at random, and then compare them. And as a committee, vote to remove one of them, leaving us with 2. Then we'll bring up another one at random. Rosalind can bring them up and whatever he wants to. And we'll compare those 3, remove 1, so we have 2 left. And continue that down till we end up having 3 on the screen. And then we'll have a discussion as whether we're gonna eliminate any of those or forward all 3 of those to the board. Does that sound like something you want to think about?
There's one little tweak to this I think might work. I think there's going to be some maps that are similar. There's a quality of map that will be similar that are being put forth by different people. And if we can group those together and maybe have those, whoever, the groups of people who came up with those, maybe come up with a way of combining them or coming up with one that they're all comfortable with. That might be a stage of that. Okay. We are starting to see some patterns of how some maps are coming together. I think Ruslan could be very helpful with this. And in fact, on this level, I would love to see a map from Ruslan because he's seen how everybody's done it. He's spoken to everybody who's done it. And I think he has a lot of valuable information. And if he wouldn't be opposed to it, I would love to see him create a map. If that's acceptable by the, I don't know if staff is out.
I don't think so.
Why?
We're charged as a committee to put that.
Yeah, he's a citizen and he's also been sitting on the committee.
Well,
he's been staffing the committee.
If he wants to present one as a citizen and he put the map together on his own time, I suppose. I just don't want to get staff involved with presenting maps at this point. I would suggest that with careful thought, you could figure something out.
Right. I was just wondering is there any legal reason with that? From the perspective of this committee, is staff, because I know in other counties, some of the other counties staff are drawing maps, and I don't know if that's a problem or just.
I think, programmatically, if you wanted staff to prepare a map for consideration, I think you could do that. Ultimately, it would have to be your judgment and your findings and everything, but
okay.
Yeah,
so
but I think it's something you could do.
Well, I'd still like to see that because I think it's an opportunity.
I should have asked Greg since he was here.
Yeah, no, that's I did have a thought in my mind that it might not be appropriate, but since we have counsel here, because it's hard to say if that's all these rules work.
Not putting him on the spot. He doesn't have to do it.
No, it would be something he'd have to be interested in doing. So that would be his call by all means.
And before we start tonight, you've got the 20 on 10 map?
Correct.
Just the picture?
Oh, did you want that up there?
To show the results, yeah. Ruslan and I were working on something this morning, and we took the 2010 districts as we see currently. And then we laid the 2020 census districts over it. Oh, you can't tell the difference? That's because they look pretty much the same. There's one small, tiny spot up in 3-5, right there where he's pointing the arrow. It has 40 people in it. That's the only distinct difference between the 2010 districts and the 2020 census blocks laid over it. Now, look at the populations. I can't see that from here. Ruslan, can you read them out?
Oh, never mind. I try to make it bigger. Yeah, so sorry. So District 1 has 7,265. District 2 has 9,381. District 3, 6,448. And District 5, 6,913. 6,913.
Yeah, which I repeat what everyone in the room knows is that District 2 having over 9,000, having to get rid of them means that all the other districts has to suck down toward the west, move down toward the west, with the possible exception of District 1, who's almost right on the money at 7,300 or something. But it'll have to change because you can't get to District, you can't get to District 3 from District 2 without going through 5 or 1. So, but it was just a little exercise to show that the census districts do conform to the current 2010 supervisorial boundaries, with one tiny little exception.
Mr. Chairman, I'm aware of another as well. This is because of the 49 bypass between Sutter Creek and Amador City. They made two census tracts out of one. I don't know if but it's hard to find because the highway is there. But that's one that we noticed.
Most of the differences I've seen
Anyway,
has been adding census blocks being cut up into multiple census blocks is the biggest thing I've seen. Is like once where there was one, now there are two, and sometimes three.
Yeah. Oh, there's lots of changes in.
But they're all internal. Yeah.
But there was only one significant overlap between and then the populations. That's all I brought that up for. Okay. There's no further questions of County Council. You're welcome, free to leave if you like. Did your son win? Okay. All right, so we'll keep in mind the process, and we'll think about that, and then we'll talk about it again, and if it seems to be okay, then after we get through all these, we'll work. So, Ruslan, if you wouldn't mind bringing up one of the maps that have been drawn that we haven't yet looked at, and hopefully someone's here to talk about it.
So the first one was Bob and Andy.
Yeah, Bob's not here. He knew he wasn't going to be here. I showed up and he had already gotten a really good start on it. I don't know how long he'd been on it, probably half an hour or so. And his methodology was basically he started with the junction of districts 1 and 2, and kind of worked his way out. He was actually starting with census tracts, which I thought was interesting. I never blew up to that big level. And so he tried to get 2 down to the right level, and then filling in from 1 and moving forward from there. Then he went up to District 4 to create a clean pine grove. And then he went up to the District 3, and he didn't finish any of these districts. He got them kind of going out. And then he did 3 and then bringing it down to, obviously, because 3 is the one that always kind of ends up where it does, and it's just a matter of cleaning up the edges, because you start at the top of the county, and I guess you could do one all the way up to Kirkwood if you wanted. But no, so that, he cleaned that, it got that done. It has 4 COIs that are split. One is Comanche, one is Clinton, one is Fiddletown, and one is Martell. And that's about all he had. It's a pretty straightforward. It's in some ways similar to a few that we've seen. It puts District 5 holds Sutter Creek and all the towns along 49 up to Plymouth, and which is similar to one that I created. And I think Dawn has one that's kind of in that neighborhood. And that's what I was talking about, where these ones could possibly, all these different creators have created something that's kind of similar that we could kind of push together in one way to come with one map that we would all agree with, that I was mentioning earlier. So if anybody has any questions, I guess that's, so I think it was just 4 COIs.
Katya Anderson, District 3. Can you please blow up the area up at the top on the northern side where District 3 and 5 come together, please? And can you get rid of the filter? Is that 2 COIs right there? What is it? Lockwood and or something?
Yeah, it's Lockwood and Fiddletown. I believe Lockwood and Fiddletown overlap.
Okay.
Well, I think of the COI that we're using, I think they actually do.
Lockwood and Fiddletown do but the only one that's split between districts
Right.
is
Right.
Fiddletown.
Yeah, and I think some of the thing with Fiddletown COI is the thing that we've had with a bunch of them is that it's census blocks that we would normally have cut through to get the actual COI, which is the same problem we keep talking about on all of them. So I don't think it's a giant cut on Fiddletown, and we've seen this cut before. This is a place where many of us have driven lines. That it is our COI of Fiddletown. Yeah, the dark purple is our. And left. The dark one further down is Plymouth. Yeah. And I almost created a COI of Plymouth and Fiddletown because that's something we keep hearing about in these meetings, and but I didn't. Yeah, like I did the Sutter Creek and Amador City. I did do a COI for those because it has been, and we had that meeting where they changed my mind about how it was appearing. So I decided that since we keep hearing about it, it is actually a COI. And it's one of those COIs that's a couple COIs put together. Yeah, you can do the check. I'm pretty sure the review is clean. The other COI that's split, one of them is Martell, and there's not many people living in it, so I'm not sure how critical that one is. I personally would have a few tweaks on this map myself, but I wouldn't be. I'm not offended by this map at all.
Yeah, for the extent of the splits and the COIs, they all seem pretty easy to be able to clean up with a minimum of effort.
Well, with the exception of Comanche, and I have one of the maps that we put as an exercise is we could talk about it then. I think would be a better time to talk about the Comanche issue. Zoom out. Yeah.
Zoom in on
4. Yeah, that's one area I thought was a little bit unusual, but it was his choice to. expand that one? That 50, it does. That 150 block and the 180 block right below it, those two, those ones go right into town, but all the population, I think, is at the bottom. It's one of those ones that it's given me grief when trying to draw lines. And yeah, so there's a few of those around the county that are like that, that make it really hard to draw. There's a couple around Plymouth that you grab the top of the edge and it drags you all the way up and like to the next COI. Right there, right in the middle. And it's in District 5. Yeah, sure. You know, that also comes up on that idea map that the idea, I think if we might want to go to that now, because I think that'll cover that. It's a good way of looking at it, if you don't mind. No, so Ruslan, you know which map I'm talking about? Yeah. This is a map Don and I worked on this morning after we spoke with Keith. We were all kind of overlapping on our mapping time. And what we did here is District 1 is basically, if you live in that area, you say you live in Jackson. You may not be in the city limits, but most people in that area say they live in Jackson. There's probably people outside of that area that we marked that live in Jackson, that say they live in Jackson, right? So, and the same thing is, so I'm not saying that these are exact boundaries or anything, but it's an idea. And if you look at the population on it, can you? Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't trying to get anything real super specific. This is more of an intellectual exercise.
Yeah, and these are all things that have come up in the meeting.
Absolutely.
People have agreed on where certain areas identify with a certain core.
Sure.
So this is agreements that the committee has had over the length of time of the committee meetings.
And we could push, you know, like this, you could also make the argument that Martell can be considered part of Jackson, as well as you can make the argument that Martell can be considered part of Sutter Creek.
Right. Yeah. Which is why in this map it's not part of either.
Yeah, but for this particular exercise, and so when we go down to District 2, in the meetings we've heard these are areas that have been very specifically said that they are definitely District 2. And if you look, and it goes all the way from the joint meeting we had with the Board of Supervisors when we were doing COIs, and we were talking about that one, which is I'm name is forgetting the name.
Willow
of that.
Creek.
Willow Creek, thank you. And Supervisor Forrester was saying he said it went from there all the way to basically down to the town of Plymouth. To the town of Ione. Sorry. And so I included all those. And if you look at the population there, it's over the current number that we can have.
Yeah, it's over the target.
And again, anybody in that purple area could make a claim to being part of Ione. In fact, probably large swaths of area around there too. But these are places that have been problematic, and so I thought I'd throw it all into one map to show us what also could be considered a core of a district. People would make an argument that it's a core of a district, and you could go the same thing with Jackson. That's a core of a district. So let's go up to District 5 for Plymouth, if you can. And so we just tucked in the city boundaries of Plymouth, and again, people would further out would be that way, but it also, we've been hearing repeatedly that Fiddletown is connected with Plymouth, so I added those together. And that's an extremely small population if you look at the whole thing. I think, what is there, about 1,100 people there?
1,800.
1,800, so almost 2,000 people. So, but only like, a quarter or a third of a district. So now we can go down to Sutter Creek. Oh, please.
Would we not consider the sphere of influence as part of the core?
You could. I wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah, that could go either way.
Yeah, and you could lump in, you know, a big circle around Plymouth, I wouldn't have an issue with that.
But with Plymouth, some of the census blocks that touch the downtown area go out for miles from there.
Yeah.
Especially to the north and west.
And with Plymouth, honestly, I'm not that concerned with it because it's, in every map we've seen, it's got a clean target of on a district. So that's, again, not one I'm going to worry too much about because I haven't seen one where that's going to be an issue. Let's go upcountry.
Yeah.
And so all I did with upcountry was that's basically the bulk of the population until you get towards Pine Grove, and you can make an argument how far it comes down, but there's just a bulk of the population is there, and that's still, it's almost what, 5,700. So there's quite a few people up there. And then, okay, so let's go for District 4 now. This one's a little different. So we had to do we connected them, and you can do that with zero population if you like, which follows Sutter Creek. Now, that keeps Pine Grove whole, and it keeps the COI that I did of Amador City and Sutter Creek. It's not quite the full COI, but it gives you an idea. And that one, its population is just those two is just over what we can have. You could probably get one district that high, maybe, if the other ones were, yeah, it's hard to say. I'm not sure exactly how much we have to play with there. But what you lose in this case is the area around Sutter Creek that all those people who think they're living in Sutter Creek or Amador City. So Pine Grove gets everybody who's, you know, it's kind of its, for the term, its city center is completely covered, but we lose that in Sutter Creek with the way I drew this. And that's already at a fully built out district for population. So what would be the core of that district is a call, right? It's historically, you might say it was District 4 was a core of Sutter Creek. I think in these now the population is actually much higher in the Pine Grove side than it is in the Sutter Creek side. And so you can make the argument that Pine Grove is the core of District 4 now. And I don't know what arguments we would use to describe what a core would be, and maybe that's what you would like to talk about.
Well, that would be the discussion. I would submit that in the other 4 districts that you've represented, the core happens to be a city.
Except upcountry.
Well,
Upcountry is not a city.
Yeah. And that using that as an identifier for core, then Sutter Creek would be the core of District 4.
Mm-hmm. Just because it's a city.
Actually,
because it's a city, it provides, you know, city services and et cetera. I mean, I'm aware that there's a very large contingent of people in Pine Grove who take the position that Pine Grove is the core.
No, I'm not saying I don't know that people are saying that. I'm saying that I think most of the people in Pine Grove would say that the core of District 4 has probably been Sutter Creek. It's just at this point in time, it may not be appropriate anymore.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, AB 849 specifically states that cities, incorporated cities, and census designated places are to be treated equally. One doesn't carry greater weight than the other according to the law.
I'll take your word for it. I don't.
I got it right here.
Okay. But that may be true. We're still trying to define what core is.
Sure.
Yes.
And there's no doubt that the sense of the members of this committee is that Pine Grove has been slighted for a number of years, and it needs to have some resolution to some degree, if not totally or some partially,
mm-hmm.
To get get rid of having 4 supervisors and get down to 1 if possible, or 2 if necessary. I think I submit that that's the consensus of the group at the table here.
Yeah, I get that.
And for the record, we've been very conscientious in keeping all of the conversations, written and otherwise, with respect to this committee. They're all available in public on our website, and the predominant amount of submissions, is from the Pine Grove area with respect to their concerns. So it's not an issue that we wish to avoid. Mr. Garibaldi.
Yeah. Question. This is not based on the mapping. This is, about being around here forever. But I live in Jackson, as does Keith. What's the groups or the committee's feeling on? Does Pine Grove feel more like they relate with Sutter Creek, or more like they relate to Upcountry?
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, it depends on who you ask. And honestly, I don't know that you would get
a good consensus.
A good consensus,
I always,
yeah.
There
has been a connection with Sutter Creek because we're in that. A lot of it, we're represented by District 4, but I don't know that. I mean, I think that's the only reason. I don't know that there's a natural.
My feeling is those were people trying to move a little bit away from the population centers and the city. You chose to live in the unincorporated areas of Pine Grove and Pioneer, which kind of says you're in that and have less in common with the folks down in Jackson or Sutter Creek.
Yeah, no, well, and it's definitely not I think of Jackson, Sutter Creek, Plymouth, like the 49 corridor thing. It's definitely not the 49 corridor thing. It's something else going on. The only reason I'm hesitant about Upcountry is because I was one of the founding members of the Upcountry community councils and was resoundingly tossed out because I wasn't Upcountry. So we got it all set up from a Pine Grove project, and then they wanted nothing to do with Pine Grove. So it's a little sensitive.
I only bring that up or ask that question is so we don't struggle to try and keep Sutter Creek and Pine Grove as kind of a core together, because I'm not sure that the people up there in both spots really have that much, I'm not sure that somebody in Pine Grove would say, I'm from Sutter Creek.
No, and I think that's the case. There will be individuals anywhere who would say anything that we could come up with as an idea. But I think in general, no, Pine Grove is Pine Grove.
Yeah.
And if you look population-wise, it's the reason I think they used it to create District 4. There was a lot of people in Pine Grove that you could fill out a district with.
Or fill out several districts.
Yeah, well, and indeed, filling out several districts. Yeah.
No, we know that. That was how they made everything work.
That is.
What I've found from living up there for 35 years is that people who live up there consider anyone who lives in a lower elevation a flatlander. And it doesn't really matter what elevation you're at. If the person lives lower than you, they're a flatlander.
Yeah, fair enough.
Chairman Sweet, we do have a comment from Ms. Heisenbuttel. And we also have Ms. Houghton at the podium. So whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
We'll take Ms. Houghton first.
I just want to say, I live in the heart of Pine Grove, in the actual Pine Grove area. I'm 15 minutes from Jackson. I'm 15 minutes from Sutter Creek. I'm 15 minutes from Buckhorn. So which do I feel attached to? I don't feel attached to any of them. I feel attached to Pine Grove. In Pine Grove, I can go shopping. I can go to the hardware store. Everything I need for basic life is in the center of Pine Grove. So I don't feel any affiliation outside of District 4.
Thank you, Jan. Who's on?
Go ahead, Ann.
This is Ann Heisenbuttel, District 5 alternate, and I also live in Pine Grove. And I would answer the question by saying I think that people in the southern part of District 5 down the 88 corridor might feel more connected to Jackson, while people in the northwest end of Pine Grove near Ridge Road would feel more connected to Sutter Creek. It just really kind of depends on where you are along those outer boundaries. But like Jan, I consider myself really from Pine Grove. And I'm even closer to Volcano, but that is such a smaller town. It's Pine Grove that provides most of the services.
Ruslan, can you put the Pine Grove COI on top of Pine Grove, or is that what it is? I don't think so. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, we even trimmed it down a little bit. I think your mic's not on. Is your mic? Okay. Yeah, I think that is, and we pruned it down. So it's not even the full COI. And it was just for population reasons, and for to give the example that I was showing, that if you'd use the core, all of Pine Grove, where we didn't even use it all, and Sutter Creek, you're at a full district, and that obviously is not a workable district the way it's drawn. But what I was really getting at with this whole map is these are the kind of the population cores, and the rest of the county is sparsely populated, and we just kind of fill in the gaps in between. That's why I think it's an interesting tool if you're drawing some maps. And that's why I created it. And I'm really glad you had put together that 2020 over 2010 map. That was another one I wanted to create to see what we're working to not have, because the districts are so disparate now in size that we really needed that as a tool when I'm mapping, to have an idea of what where the problem areas are. And I think we all see at this point have seen, as we've gone in and mapped, we've seen where these problem areas are, and it shows up pretty clearly. And that was what I was also, the other thing I wanted to bring up on this is the Comanche area. I've had a hard time drawing a map without splitting Comanche, because there's a lot of people there, and it's the same, you could argue that it's the same issue that you get with, you can make an argument that Comanche should be the core of a district, right, rather than Ione. And here's the argument I have, that cities don't necessarily need to be the core of the district, in that if you live in a city, you get to, you have a layer of government that almost all your requests are going to go to. You're going to go to that city council. You're going to go to your mayor. You're not going to necessarily call your supervisor. Whereas if you're unincorporated, you only have the supervisor to call to deal with these things. And so that's why I'm less concerned about moving Sutter Creek out of District 4 and putting three districts in one, three cities in one district, because all those people living in those cities have a layer of government that if they have an issue with that, they're probably going to go to first. And so the supervisor isn't going to be dealing with the issues in those cities anyway, unless I'm incorrect on that. But I don't think that the supervisor is going to be the one to get involved at that city level. So that was one argument where I know it came up early at one other time, that having all three different cities in District 5 is like a lot in one district. So I just don't buy that. Otherwise, that's all I have on this map. Thank you.
This is Ann Heisenbuttel, and I wanted to add one comment. When Tom and Keith and I did our map, we also had to trim some away from the outskirts of Pine Grove. And I think that the way you did it, Andy, is very similar to what we had done. It
Sure.
Makes sense to me.
I also wanted to add Katya Anderson, District 3. I wanted to also add that although I agree with Andy about having representation for the people in Comanche, I feel like a lot of people who live in the city bounds of Ione are also going to complain about it more, because they would feel like it's more obvious that, like, hey, we're part of Ione. Obviously, we need to be part of, this supervisorial district. So if we had to split a COI and Ione happened to be one of them, I feel like a lot of people would have a grievance with that. So I feel like Comanche is definitely one of those tough spots, because I don't know if we're ready to pull up the map that Bruce, Stephanie, and I made, but ours is like District 5's pretty big geographically wise.
Yeah, and Katya, this is Andy. That was the point I was making. Yeah, exactly. Is that you can make an argument for any of these, but I mean, historically, Ione has been the center of the thing, and we will anger less people if we do that. But it's a point that we've started with from the very beginning, that it's a contentious area that's going to be difficult.
Katya, I put it up, by the way.
Yeah, that sounds like a good segue.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, wait a minute. You're getting ahead of me, Rustlin. Any other comments with respect to core districts? I'm not sure.
We didn't come up with an answer.
Pardon?
We didn't come up with an answer.
No, and I personally am having trouble with District 4 in terms of that kind of configuration.
Yeah.
Which I'm probably not alone, but I understand. Thank you very much, guys, for putting that together. It's informative, instructive, and food for thought.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Jen.
Would you explain your reservation about considering Pine Grove as the core of a district?
Well, we have a kind of a split decision here in terms of core. I mean, I have Sutter Creek and I have Pine Grove, and they're two distinct entities. Either one, I suppose, could be considered core together. It's hard to think of them together in that configuration,
right?
With just a stream running between them.
It's just kind of like linking Kirkwood to Plymouth, just as silly.
But because of the size of the community of interest, the population, and I'm getting the feeling that you don't think Pine Grove should be considered as a block by itself. That it's okay that it's going to get split.
I would like to see it as a block by itself. I'm not sure that that's the way it will end up.
No, I understand, but I'm getting a reservation that it's not being taken as seriously as a city would be.
I'm sorry I gave you that impression. I'm probably one of your biggest defenders, but I have to ask questions.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, no problem.
I think probably one thing that we've been looking at is we can kind of see why it's been split up in the past is because people feel that they are connected to different districts and areas and stuff. And because it's more or less in the middle, it kind of gets drawn in each direction.
I think one of the...
And I'll make a comment here in response to your question. I mentioned this to Andy this morning. Politics is the art of the possible, and we do have to send something to the board that we would reasonably and think that they might adopt. And that's part of I think a practical concern of mine, and I think it should be the practical concern of the committee. Maybe the committee doesn't agree with me, but
I don't disagree, but I can't read their mind, honestly. I don't know. And that was why we had talked about it last time, is that do we need direction from the board? Because they get to make the decision at the end, and maybe we need direction from the board after we need to present them with what we have, and then have some feedback before we dive too far down picking maps. You know, because at this point, if you're right and they don't like what we're coming up with using the data that we have in front of us and the public input that we've derived from this process, I don't know how to go from there if they don't like that, and if they don't like the process that we've taken through on the task that was handed to us.
Well, I guess I'm thinking in a larger sense. You know, we could put a map together that looks really pretty and looks right. You know, we have all of the right cores in the right spot, and we have, you know, all of the 5 compactness and all the 5 different things, and yet we when we overlay where our current incumbents are in 3 separate electoral villages, you know, 15 people, that the decision that a board makes will affect a total of 15 people at some point.
Yeah.
In actuality or possibility, you know, and we could put a project together that ignoring politics, and that eliminated.
You want to hear back on Don or me on this one?
I'm waiting for Don over here.
No, he's ready.
I think that's what we were doing.
I thought that was what we were tasked to do, honestly.
And we eliminate, you know, 12 of 15 electoral positions. That becomes, I think, a problem. And I'm not sure I would be comfortable in even forwarding something like that to the board.
Well, I honestly, the maps I've drawn, I have no idea what they've done in that arena. I don't know where these people live.
How are we supposed to know where they live? And why should that matter? We're supposed to be drawing maps that are fair for the citizens of the county, not for the incumbents.
Yeah, but I'm okay.
And because, okay.
I still think politically, it makes no sense to take 25, 35, 55% of the elected officials who were elected by the citizens and eliminate their positions.
They won't be eliminated. There will be elections upcoming.
But not if they.
It's not their positions, it's positions.
Pardon?
Right, it's not their positions.
I understand
elected
that. Okay,
positions,
well,
and the positions don't go away.
They will still be the incumbent.
I agree with you that is a problematic thing, but if you use that as a criteria, then you're creating tortured maps.
Yeah, and you're flying in the face of the law.
No, I'm not. No.
We're not supposed to base it off of political alias.
We can add that as a criteria after we've done the others.
Didn't it literally say not to use any political references while drawing maps? Like,
pardon me?
Yes, it does that clearly.
I'm sorry,
Chairman Sweet,
go ahead.
we do have a couple of committee member comments via Zoom. If you wanted to take comments.
Go ahead, Katya.
I was basically just reiterating that it literally said not to use any political reference while drawing up the maps, and that is an issue.
No, I understand that. No, and we haven't talked about that, and it's my contention we ought to be drawing the maps without that consideration. But at some point, we have to, I think, have a practical decision as to what 5 members of the Board of Supervisors are going to do.
I understand that, and I understand that some of them. I understand that some of them not. I understand that some of them might be concerned about losing an area or something, but that's not it's not what we're here to do. We're here to make sure that everyone has a free choice in what they want to do, and that it's not being dictated by the people who are being voted into office.
Okay, thank you.
This is Tom, District 5, Tom Patton. I have a question. If we submit 2 maps to the board, are they obligated to take one of those 2? Can they reject them both?
They're not obligated to take any of them.
They could make their own.
They can still make their own.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we're not obligated to submit 2. What we discussed earlier was we would submit from 1 to 3 maps.
Mm-hmm.
A minimum of 1, a maximum of 3.
If they can't agree on any one of them, they just ask Grisland to make one, and all this really means nothing.
Absolutely.
Like potentially.
Absolutely. We are an advisory board. The board has 3 choices. They either chose to keep it and do it themselves straight up, or they create a board that does the maps and they have to accept it, or they choose a board that's a committee, that's an advisory committee, It gives them advice and listens to citizens' discussions, of which we haven't had much of. And that's what we are, and that's what we had. Those are the three options they had. I believe that would be correct summarization.
I don't mean to demean this committee at all. The question wasn't directed that way. It was mostly just, I wanted to get factual and get reality on the table. Because whatever we do is gonna have to fly with these guys.
That's correct. And I was kind of pushing in that direction, but,
You know, our wishes are not
we may, as a committee, that might be the case.
Reading on this NDC thing, there has to be public hearings on the draft maps, and they have to have at least 2 submitted.
Right, okay.
Okay, and
we'll have those public hearings, and they're already scheduled.
And the other side thing I'd like to say is, I think the Board of Supervisors individually are savvy enough to realize that there are going to be some even major changes to their district, and are pre-mindset that they will have to accept those changes one way or another.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Ann.
Ann Heisenbuttel, District 5. I think the conundrum, going back to Jan's previous question about District 4 and Pine Grove, is that we're trying to connect we're trying to connect the Pine Grove and the Sutter Creek Amador, keep them together, and that is creating too much population. So if we keep Pine Grove as a whole, then do we need to move Sutter Creek and Amador City into another district? I don't know if we want to do that or not, but that is one option that we haven't really talked about. I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that's part of the challenge of keeping Pine Grove whole. What do we do with that connection between Pine Grove and Sutter Creek and Amador City?
Thank you, Ann. Well, finally, we're getting some conversation on this committee other than just me and Andy. So that's what I've been trying to work on here for all night long.
Well, Patty Fisher, Mizuraka, District 2. Is my mic's not on?
It's on.
It's on. It says it's on. It's red. I'll just try and speak louder. Is there another one there?
Should be on.
Are we going? Wait, that one sounds better than this one. I just taken in all the conversation here this evening and hearing, you know, I understand that that area going through Pine Grove, I think ideally that's what we're wanting to do. We're wanting to keep these core cities and communities together. And when Keith brought up the fact that we can't make this political, we spoke about that this evening with legal counsel. Again, we go back to Tom's comment that they could wipe all of this out. So if we have 15 elected individuals, we have to take some of that into consideration, because again, I've lived here for 57 years. I know where most of our elected officials live. I know a lot of them. So I can kind of say whether you're going to wipe out 5, people. So I think we need to, somewhere in these layers, keep that in mind. I know we can't make this political, but we've got to keep it in the back of our mind. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? We're calling this the core city map, right? I mean, the core map.
Yeah, you can.
Core map, okay. Well, we'll take that down and bring back Andy's first map, please. Andy and Bob, I guess.
Oh, yeah, Bob's map. Yeah, it's under Andy and Bob.
Okay. Anybody have any further comment or questions on this one, which essentially puts all the cities where they're regularly supposed to be, except Sutter Creek, Amador City, and Plymouth are in District 5.
Tom Patton, District 5. I'm a little concerned about the amount, the new line between District 5 and District 3, eliminating so many folks that do consider themselves to be part of Fiddletown. I don't know how we correct that, but that's a reality right there, what I'm looking at. Because there's Fiddletown, there's people that consider themselves part of Fiddletown. They got Fiddletown addresses. I know we're not supposed to consider the post office, but almost all of that brown gray area is Fiddletown. Well, all of it is.
It doesn't go up quite that far, but that's a function of the census block.
I said almost.
Yeah, it really is a function of the census blocks, of the cut through there.
Yeah.
Because even with population, you could draw it differently, but if you add that next census block over, it goes way up.
I know, that's the
Yeah,
conundrum.
and there's a few places I'd like to redraw some census blocks.
Well, lay the Fiddletown COI on top of that, Russell.
I think you need to turn Lockwood off.
Pardon?
I think you need to turn Lockwood off.
That's all Fiddletown COI.
Oh, that is, okay.
Okay, can you zoom in a little
Okay,
bit
yeah,
more?
okay, so, yeah,
Okay, you see there's that one big district there,
yeah.
or the one big block.
That's one big block.
So the dark brown is Fiddletown
Yeah.
COI.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Fiddletown itself.
So, but how many, what's the population of that one? I mean,
I don't know.
let's get down to the nuts and bolts.
Okay, if I may.
He's talking about having a really big block there that's hard to get rid of, but how big of an impact is it? It's 120 people?
It's about 200 people.
About 200 people. Okay.
That's a thumbnail.
Considering the size of that, 200 people is not very much.
No, it
Right,
isn't.
so to keep with our
One of them.
process, we're looking at this map. We have a concern by one of the committee members, which we should relay back to Andy and Bob. And seems to be if they want to bring that map back at a later date, see if they can change it, affect that concern. Is that the only concern anyone has on that one? Don't bring up Pine Grove, please.
Can you put Dry Creek up?
Yeah, Dry Creek's cut in half. Oh, yeah, did I not list that one? Oh, I may not have listed, that's the fifth one, sorry, my bad.
I'm sorry, Don, what'd you ask?
Most of it, Dry Creek.
Yeah.
Most of it is contiguous.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
I'm more worried about Fiddletown. I just think we're isolating people from their hometown.
How many, oh, sorry, this mic doesn't work, sorry.
Okay, well, your objection's noted, and the minutes will reflect that, and we will have them see if they can manipulate that so we can come back and add it back into the mix. Can you bring up the next map, please? By the way, I did invite the newspaper and the radio station to tonight's meeting, but
So this one was Stephanie Bruce.
unless they're on Zoom. Okay, who's the presenter here?
And this is the Steph Bruce Katia effort. And the two where we started with was District 4, but I'll get back to that. The two drivers, the big dogs, were Jackson and Ione. And we had originally contemplated having those two districts abut each other. But just population-wise, you can see that we couldn't come close at all. So anyway, District 1 is Jackson and its immediate environs east to Clinton. That includes 7,530 people, which is a plus 212 over the optimum. District 2 is Ione, Comanche Village, and Comanche North Shore only. That's 7,320 people, which is on the number.
Yeah, right.
It does not include Buena Vista, which is historically associated with Ione. District 3, Upcountry, pretty much as it exists now. That's 7,195, minus 123 on the optimum. And I think treats that core, the triple Pioneer, Buckhorn, and Red Corral as co-equals. District 4 tries to treat Sutter Creek and Pine Grove as co-equals. Also incorporates in Amador City with its relationship to Sutter Creek, and Pine Acres with its relationship to Pine Grove. So that's 7,486 population, a plus 168. So now we get to District 5, which we're calling the Rural Agricultural District. Because it includes a lot of prime ag land and smaller communities, which are Buena Vista in the south, Dry Town, City of Plymouth, Fiddletown, River Pines, Shenandoah Valley, and Willow Creek. And we also added Volcano, which we had originally considered to be an extension of Pine Grove and possibly then in District 4. So it's still light. It's the most sparsely populated. 7,061 is the count, which is a minus 257.
Does this meet?
Can you run the review?
Does it make the check?
I don't think we got that far.
We definitely missed the connecting part.
What's the X on? I can't read those.
There was just an unassigned, some water that was unassigned.
Oh, yeah, unassigned is, that's less.
Okay. And we have not yet gone back to look at this.
There was the overall range didn't meet the.
Yeah, deviation was all.
Population deviation?
Well, the largest was 257, and the 5% deviation is 366.
Yeah, but you gotta combine
From
that
top
with
to
a
bottom.
negative.
Yeah, you gotta go.
You have a negative in there at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have yes, we do, a minus 123.
You have to add that to
District
the
3.
positive.
Okay, so just two editorial comments. One, we have not, and Katya, be sure to chime in here, but we have not gone back and looked at this as first draft. We've not gone back and looked at this in any extreme detail, and we also have not checked it for the communities of interest.
Yeah, I think Bruce wrapped that up really well. We are also kind of looking at making sure that the northern fork of Shake Ridge Road was in District 3. That was something that we aligned with upcountry values of being in the snow line and making sure that interests were covered there. We're kind of struggling with the volcano part and wanting to balance population, especially among District 1 and 5. But yeah, we plan to get that more ironed out.
Well, we have time, and it should be a good exercise for everybody to see what those who might not have been here before, although I'm not sure, I can't read the Zoom attendees, whether we've got any new folks. I don't see any new folks in the audience, but why don't you quickly run through the COIs on the map? And then leave those that are overlapping checked, and then Bruce and Katya can work from there. Just one at a time.
That one overlapped.
What was that last one?
Carbondale.
Comanche.
Carbondale.
Comanche overlaps, and he's leaving it on.
Oh, I read them off, sorry.
Read them off as you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Climax overlaps. Clinton. Dry Creek. Dry Town. Eagles Nest. Electra.
Maybe not.
Fiddletown. Gala Manor. Kind of overlaps a little bit. Grinding Rock.
It's a little hard anyway.
Ione Band. Irish Town Road. Jackson Pines. Overlaps. San Rancheria. Jackson Valley. Casey Ranchettes. Lockwood. Lupe Road. Mace Meadows. Martell. I guess technically it overlaps, but Mariah Heights. Echo. Mountain Zion. Pine Acres. That overlaps a little bit. Pine Grove. Pioneer. Previtali. Previtali 2. Ranch House Estates. Ridge. This is Ridge Road. Lower Ridge. Middle Ridge. Upper Ridge. Yeah. River Pines. Running Gold. It technically overlaps. Shenandoah. Sherwood Forest. Sugar Pine Ridge. Surrey Junction. Sutter Highlands. The Oaks. Bandahigh. volcano. Warner Road. And Willow Estates. So the ones that are left selected are the ones that overlap.
There's another one that this has happened, and I wasn't looking for it until later. The sphere of influence of Ione pokes up past the top.
So, yeah.
And so that's, the sphere of influence is also in a different district than 2. So,
Yeah.
and that happened to me in Jackson a couple places, and so.
It's the lightly shaded
Yeah.
behind the cities.
I didn't see any that, overlapped that was into more than 2, though. Were there any?
Pine Grove is in 3.
Some of those overlaps that you left on are rather slight. But good job, Bruce. And Katya did that over Zoom, right? Right. Yeah, well done. I can hardly do it sitting right in front of the screen, so good job.
Yeah.
So that gives you something to work on, Bruce?
There's one other place that, I think that there's areas around Sutter Creek that would consider themselves in Sutter Creek, the greater Sutter Creek area, that definitely wouldn't fall into the same district. Like we were talking about how Pine Grove is a bunch of overlaying, COIs. I think Sutter Creek has the same thing going on too, but we just didn't do that in Sutter Creek because Sutter Creek had the city boundaries. But there's people right outside the city boundaries. There's some communities that are just up the hill that I'm sure they think of themselves as Sutter Creek that are not included in this district.
Overall, I like your philosophy about keeping the large ag properties together, as you've done in District 5.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting tactic. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great.
And it appears that Pine Grove is kept whole?
No, I think it's split into 3 pieces.
Yeah, split up into 3.
Can we look over that one more time, please? To clarify, just for.
Yeah, it's in District 1, District 4, and District 3.
I do think it's noteworthy. If you zoom in on the part that it's in District 3, does that say 0 right there? No, it doesn't. Okay.
Yeah, some of it's where a current boundary is. It's nearby where the current boundary is up through Amador Pines.
Okay, as with others, I look forward to seeing this one come back. You have any questions, Bruce, or any other information?
Nope, I think we have enough to work with. Thank you.
Okay, next.
This one is Andy Jan 2.
Oh, yeah, we went over this one. I did change it a little bit.
Is this the one we saw last week?
Yeah, it's stinking around the edges of some of the problems. Like I honestly don't recall. Because I did another one in the interim, and I think if Andy Solo might overlap with this one. I just kind of did a fresh one that was, and it's very much of the same flavor, and it might be. No, I think it would be a combination with the other one. Can you show the other one, Andy Solo? Because I think what I was doing is just cleaning up with some of the comments of the previous one.
This is Tom Patton again. I'm making an observation, is maybe just a voice of reason. I'd like to ask that when we do these maps and do the communities of interest, particularly with respect to Pine Grove, where we have a goal of reducing the number of districts that they fall in. Can we get a value on the actual population that's outside? Because there may be a matter of 100 people or 50 people. When you add them up, if we looked at all these different maps, there may not be that many people that are being affected by not being in Pine Grove, in District 4, if you will.
I think that could be argued with any of the COIs that we're splitting, that it would be good to get down to the nitty gritty on that. I don't disagree.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to take into consideration.
That's a good thought for people to go back and look at there, and maybe have that kind of information at the ready when we bring your map back up the next time when we start doing it.
Can you speak into your microphone, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I turned it off because I was eating a potato chip.
And we all thank you for that.
I said, Tom's comment is a good comment, and we should keep that in mind, and the map makers should keep that in mind, and so that they could, in a sense, justify the overlap in terms of numbers and so forth, and say, as Tom is suggesting. When we come back and look at this map again, when we are going to compare it to two others and eliminate one, that's when we can talk about those things. We can fine tuning them then. Okay, good point.
And I think this map and the other one I did with Jan fits in with the one that Bob did, in that basically I think the biggest difference is that we've drawn lines where District 5 contains Sutter Creek. And I think any maps like that, those I think could be combined as one strategy.
I leave that to you to do.
Yeah, well, I don't know, there's some, like, I think Don had something similar to that, and then I've got one, and then with the one I did with Bob too, so.
Well, know which ones they are, let's identify them, and as with X's by them or something, and then we can bring them all up at the same time.
Yeah, there you go.
Which was your
Yeah, no, I agree.
preference.
Well, one of the things that concerns me about this map is that, Jackson, people.
Yeah, I came right down to Jackson.
Jackson doesn't end at the city limits, and I believe, up towards the Rancheria and up 88, there's, for a while, there are people who may identify as being Jackson residents or being associated with Jackson.
For sure.
That are on the other side of the city limit.
Yeah, well, we certainly do. That's a good point. Our Clinton population and West Clinton population, I think, reasonably.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah.
And that is something that I've looked at. One of the things I was doing was I was keeping District 2 smaller, since it's the district growing currently in the last 10 years. And so if we keep it on the smaller side compared to some of the other districts that aren't growing as much, we might alleviate some problems in the future. Maybe not. But I was thinking, if we're going to have a discrepancy, I'd rather keep the growing districts on the smaller side and the ones that haven't been growing on the larger side. Just as kind of my thought in planning is looking ahead. And that's one of the things I got to list. I think I could combine this map and work with Bob and this one, and then talk to Jan again. And I think those three maps, I think they're comparable enough that it's just a matter of shifting edges. But I think the basis of the map is, I think we're all in those maps are all in the same category. And I think Don may even have a map in that category.
Okay.
Because I think Don has a map in almost every category.
Want to bring that map up next?
Which one?
One he just alluded to?
No. With Don's, I'm not sure which one it would be.
Yeah.
I've looked at a bunch of them.
Was it Don good one?
Well, Don has several good ones. Well, they're degrees.
Was it this one?
That's the one we saw last week, right?
Yeah, it is.
But that's not the one you're referring to, Andy.
Sorry, I don't know that I was referring to anyone in particular. I just know that Dawn had one where the 49 corridor included, the District 5 basically included 3 cities, like mine did. I think that's the biggest key on it, right? If you do that, the maps tend to have a similar look.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is one strategy of keeping the balances right and keeping the COIs in check. This is one approach. And I think it's just a matter of going around the edges on that, of where your boundaries are. And I think if all the people who've drawn maps like that, we could get together, we could come up with one that we'd all agree with.
Do we have any more?
That was the Andy Solo was actually the last one, since Andy Jan 2 and Andy Solo were basically
the same map.
I eliminated one.
And I did that when I did the Andy Solo. I just kind of stopped what I was thinking, and I tried to go back and do it again and see what I came up with. And I did come up with something very similar. And so my train of thought at that point, the only way for me to come up with something different is I'm going to have to be put in a room with somebody else. And I'm totally up for that. And that's why it was interesting that I'm not sure how much effect I had on Bob, but maybe I had a lot of effect on him. I don't know. He was rolling on his own, and I was just watching from the side. So
was Andy Solo one we can scratch?
You can, yeah. I think it's close enough to Jan one that I'm happy to scratch that. Now, I would use it as a reference point, looking at working them all together. I think it's one thing. All the maps I've done are one thing, I think.
Well, we've gone through all the maps now, that we've looked at them singularly, and everybody has had a chance to get comments.
I was hoping more people would get out there and make some maps.
Yeah. So I don't want us to keep us here for no reason. We could begin the process of making comparisons, but we still haven't had a chance to tweak the maps.
Right.
So here's what we face. I thought I brought that with me. Yeah. The board is meeting on the 9th.
Correct.
And the 23rd of the 9th of November, the 23rd of November, and the 7th of December for 3 public meetings. We are meeting tonight, and then we meet again on the
8th, Monday the 8th.
The 8th, which is before their first public hearing. Obviously, it would be nice for us to have something for their meeting on the 9th. The question is, can we finish our thing in one more night? I don't think so.
Yeah, it seems tough.
We set aside Monday the 1st.
Correct.
Last time, we all raised our hands and said we could make it, but we didn't book it.
Right.
I would like to suggest that we book it and then we definitely will be able to finish on the 8th. I think. Do 6 more hours? We scheduled 3 for tonight. We've done 2 and a quarter.
You know what I think might help is if we just talk about some of the problem areas as a committee. Like, okay, so the approach to Ione, so you can either go north or you can go south, because I pushed maps both directions, and I can't go south with it and get all of Comanche. So do we talk about that? Do we want to talk, it's like Willow Creek. I was given a lot of grief at a meeting by Richard Forrester about Willow Creek not being accurate. And the way we're drawing these maps now, Willow Creek is not in District 2 anymore. So I think we could talk about philosophically how we want to approach this. Fiddletown being part of Plymouth, that we came up with that last time, and people are have strong feelings about it, not splitting up Fiddletown. You've heard us from Pine Grove beat that drum the whole time. So I don't know what other people have feelings about where places that really matter.
Is there any way that if we're going to meet on Monday, I know we saw, at least for me, I saw 2 maps that I think I would feel pretty solid looking at and maybe tweaking just slightly. If we could look at 2 or 3 maps on Monday, and that's what we do, and we just point to you, no, pull this out, can we pull that out? And we design a map together as a group from those 3 by having you tweak it as we speak. Yeah.
Yep,
I'd like to second that. I think that's actually a really great idea.
Because I think we're close. I don't think we're that far. I don't think we're that far off. But I think if we all can voice our opinion as we're doing this actively, and keep Pine Grove together, we're going to try to do that. I'm listening.
Well, so are you saying the maps you're seeing are you seeing that the ones that I've done that split Sutter Creek and Pine Grove as not tenable?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Or do you see the one that because that's a critical thing. Do we need to keep Pine Grove and Sutter Creek connected? Because if I'm barking up the wrong tree if that's what everybody agrees on.
I don't think so. I think that's a logical.
I don't think so.
I think it's a logical split. For me,
I think it's a logical split.
I'm not sure exactly where it's going to end up, but I'm hearing, that, we've got a large population in Pine Grove. We need to focus on a lot of these specific requests and then go out, like we were talking with Tom, because I like Tom's idea when we were looking at one map, and he said, I think these 200 people need to come into this map from Fiddletown.
Right.
Well, let's do it. Let's try it. Let's see what happens now. And we may be able to get it done in an hour. So
Chairman Sweet, I'll also add that if you do have your meeting on Monday the 1st, you'll be able to submit that in the agenda packet on the 5th for the 9th meeting, which would give the supervisors, enough time to review any maps that would be submitted within that packet.
Right, and the fallback position to the first.
Mike?
Would be an explanation.
There you go.
My mic is on.
Yeah, you just weren't close enough. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm personally not adverse to making a presentation on a map or something, but I think if we don't have one ready, our fallback position is to explain to the board where we are, how we got where we are, what we're doing, several examples of what we're looking at, and that would be, I think, sufficient for the first.
Well, and I think that showing some different progress, like if like I said, the maps I've been doing, if that's completely out of left field, I'd rather know sooner than later, because, so if we can present them if we can get some direction from them, because like I said, at this point, you're not wrong. I don't want to hand them maps that they're just going to, toss out, because that does nobody any service at all.
I agree.
I think
would it make any sense for, this is Tom, District 5, would it make any sense, and would we be allowed, for example, Don and I, could we have a private meeting with Brian that would not be any Brown Act problem, and just get their feedback? And each district would do that?
Greg. We got county council right here. Turn your head and ask him.
Did I just,
in the hot seat.
I mean, they know the districts better than anybody.
So I think you could, as the appointees, discuss it with your district supervisor. You just won't be able to discuss it amongst yourselves until you get back to the meeting, right? So you won't be able to share, like if you sat down with, other groups from other districts and said, well, this is what Supervisor Oneto says, you just need to wait. So yes, you can meet separately with your supervisor and get some thoughts and bring it back to the committee. You could do that.
But no serial meeting.
You just won't be able to discuss it amongst yourselves until you get back to the meeting.
Right.
Would we be able to take our supervisor and do a mapping exercise with them?
I don't see why not.
Okay. Yeah. I definitely wanted to ask that. Because I think that would also be good for the supervisors to come in and take a look at what we're actually dealing with. So I will make that effort personally.
Chairman Sweet, we
Additionally,
do have a comment
Okay,
via Zoom.
Robin, you're on.
Please go ahead when ready.
Mr. Peters?
Yes, thank you. I may be reading the tea leaves wrong. Sometimes I don't get the nuances through Zoom, but my caution to the committee would be simply to resist the notion of consensus. I'd recommend that you don't try to hone in on a singular direction and present that to the board, even if it's 3 maps that are nuances of one another. I think you need to reflect, or I should say, suggest to the board 3 different approaches to the same problem. And that may include maps that some of the committee members don't agree are viable or appropriate or the best. Don't try to find consensus amongst the committee. Let the board figure that out. Present them options and present them with clear explanations as to the problems and how you arrived at such different maps, all of which achieve the same goal. So those are my comments. Thank you.
I like that. This is Andy Byrne again. I really like that because that's kind of the point I was making. Like the 3 maps that I've been involved with, they all kind of have a similar philosophy, and one of them might be appealing to some, but not the other 2. But that could be one map with 3 different variations. And as I could see that if we presented them with 3 maps, it might be 9 maps, each map having a couple variations that might make it possible. Maybe that's going too far, but and maybe I'm extrapolating a little further than Robin was.
Well, let's proceed with our process and see how that pans out.
Yeah.
Keeping that in mind.
So that's what I'm saying when I'm talking about not ditching my maps or anybody's maps, but maybe doing variations on them and having them as a packet. Because
this is Don Dow, District 5. I have done some disparate maps that are very much unlike each other. And as we saw last week, not all of them were well received.
Well, my perception was when I talked about what I thought we would like to do is to look at every map and then go back and see them again and then compare them at 3 at a time. Eliminate one. The 2 that are left could be very disparate maps, but they're both acceptable. That's not that's fully within my range of thought.
Sure, but each one of those maps could also still be played with a little bit to change, like that Fiddletown issue. We might be able to push a boundary there as a group. It may show up on my map that I don't think it's a big deal. Other people think it's a big deal, but it still can be pushed around a little bit. And going on what was said earlier about we could do that as a group.
Yeah, I don't think we need any more maps. I think we need to start fine tuning the ones we got.
Thank you, Tom. That's what I was thinking. I don't want to start making three versions of a map and times 6.
Well, what I'm describing is like my map. I can answer the problem 2 or 3 different ways with the same kind of map. It's just with 2 or 3 different tweaks at the edges. And that would be one map, but with some options is what I'm talking about.
Okay, which leads me to the board's request.
Right.
That when we are presenting our maps, that the designers of the map, make the presentation.
Sure.
I'll be there to referee, and everybody's invited. But the listed speakers, so to speak, would be the maps that we're gonna be talking about. So if Bob and Andy did a map, and Bruce and Katya did a map, and those are the ones we settled on, then they would be the one making the presentation. And at that point in time, during the 3 public hearings, would be probably a good time to do some of your tweaking that you're talking about, so you could present to the board the various options they have.
Yeah, that's-
Those 3 maps.
Right.
Those 2 maps.
Yeah.
But for the rest of this meeting and Monday's meeting, do we want to just go back now and take a look at the map? And let's say the one where we had the Bruce's map in Fiddletown or someone's, and just sit here and play with it for a while as a group?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea to see if we can actually have any effect as a group. It might be a little bit weird, but I think it's worth trying.
Well, I mean, that was a suggestion of.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I think that's a great idea.
Was that for November 1st or the 8th?
No, I'm talking about, that would be the first.
The first public hearing.
Oh, no, the first public hearing's the 9th.
Which meeting are you talking about?
I'm talking about our meetings. Our next scheduled meeting is the 8th, but we're talking now about having one on the 1st as well, because we can't complete our task on the 8th.
Right.
And is Wednesday, the 3rd, not available?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
So we're moving the 8th meeting to the 1st?
No, we are not. We are moving.
We're having 2.
We're adding the 1st, and we're keeping the 8th.
And scratching off the 10th?
And we still have 35, 40 minutes. So do we want to go through this process, see how well it works by tweaking one of the maps that we had looked at?
I think we could do it right now.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. I don't care which map it is. I think it's like, look at one and see what we can, as a looking at it and.
Let's take a look at, Bruce, would you, be willing to use your map?
Yeah, Katya, is that okay with you?
Katya?
Yeah, that's fine. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so,
my only problem with this map right now is it doesn't actually fit the criteria. It's not a finished map.
Okay,
maybe we should work off of a finished map, one that's actually made it through the final criteria. Because we're at this point, we would be drawing a map. You see what I'm saying? The difference is, I'd rather as a group.
I'm fine.
Thinking around the edges of one that's been final, that has a final look on it.
What about the the one Bob was working on? Is that the one we were talking about moving?
Yeah, that one has
Fiddletown
a few things that could be moved.
Grabbing Fiddletown
Yeah.
and tweaking that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just need to.
And the interesting thing is when you do grab Fiddletown, you're now splitting Lockwood.
And can we just name these like,
Well, when we save them, we can save them as iterations, yeah.
redistricting?
You want to approach these by COIs?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm not sure what you mean.
I mean, the tweaking, do we want to tweak the COIs, fix those?
Oh, I don't know that we can for Fiddletown, because that next block up that has a lot of Fiddletown in it is huge.
Yeah, but is that a block group, or is that's not one block, is it?
That one in the middle is.
139.
Yeah.
What if we bring that, Tom, you said the section above too, right? In
Yes.
the population of 30, that's part of Fiddletown, correct?
Right.
What if we pull that into 5
Right, that's what he just did.
as well? And what, even the top is in as well? That dark black part?
Yeah, the gray.
That's it?
There you
Okay.
go.
Yeah, that,
So it's about 7,400.
okay, okay.
Which is still within.
So we
within
gotta
reasonable
lose,
distance.
We
Now,
gotta
the question is,
lose somewhere else.
that dark area below, is that also part of our
That is.
COI of Fiddletown?
Correct.
yes.
So, yeah, I honestly don't know the area
Yeah, and that's
Not
a little
well.
bit heavier populated.
Yeah, you add that in, it's gonna get a little bit, we're gonna go over the top, and we'll have to pull population out of District 5 somewhere else, which is totally fine.
Okay, let's try it. Let's see what happens.
So you want this added into 5?
Yeah, just take the whole COI.
Okay. So that leaves us about 7,600.
Yeah, so now we have to
Okay.
take out of about 300 somewhere
About
else.
300.
Okay,
Is that a natural southern boundary on Fiddletown?
Yes. You're you mean geologically?
Or it's a man-made or natural boundary, is
Yeah.
what they're looking for.
that,
On a creek?
Well, some of it's those, those,
Well, it might be Fiddletown, some of it's Fiddletown Road, which is the north, fork of Dry Creek,
right,
but it's not that's not a major waterway necessarily.
Yeah.
It needs to be, but if it's Fiddletown Road, that makes sense.
I was just curious.
So anybody got any ideas on where to dump 300? This is always the problem.
yeah, no, that's the whole thing.
District 1 is about 7359, District 2, 7291, District 3, 6994.
We're gonna need some there
we
too.
need some there.
Yeah.
Isn't the average we should be at approximately 7,320?
Yep,
Yeah.
So if District 3 took back on that finger right there of District 5 that's going into 3, would that put us at approximately?
That's part of one, that's part of,
that's that
one
big
block.
giant
that's at 130.
census block.
Yeah, that was the point of, putting it
Putting it in,
in as part of the COI for Fiddletown.
Right.
139.
Yeah, and we wouldn't have necessarily drawn it that way if we were drawing it with our druthers, other than using the census blocks.
Yeah, you've got to go way.
No, there were several.
But still, it's
Comanche was the big one.
split it.
Comanche's cut.
Yeah, Comanche's divided.
He's nuts.
So adding that portion.
You gotta add that little one too. There's a bunch of people in that little one.
So adding that last bit of Comanche gave us about 7,700.
Yeah,
In Ione.
yeah. That's always where I ended up.
But, I mean,
So the top half of District 2's border, where it says 871,
Yeah, you'd have to take
Where
some
is
out of
that?
there.
where is,
871 was a tract, and then now it's showing blocks.
where's Willow Creek?
Right.
Which part?
Right
That's
on the
part of in Plymouth
126,
still.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
still in
Silver
Plymouth,
yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah, and you
Um,
can't get that one with the, can't get there from here. Yeah, that 126 takes you right down to the border. It also includes some community, sphere of influence for Ione. I mean, we have taken it, there are maps that have that drawn that way. So you want to, and that would also add those additional population to District 5. And then now District 5 is
That was
way over top.
Yeah.
That's why we've drawn those lines up through Fiddletown.
Right.
Precisely why we end up there. I've gone back and forth on those areas many, many times, you know, pushing population across those two borders.
Yeah, well, we're stuck over 200.
Yeah.
On
Population
both, on both
200,
5 and,
which really, I mean, in the big picture isn't a lot.
no, but it still
Right,
puts
and
us
it
over.
falls in the same point I was making about Pine Grove.
Yeah.
How many, how many people can we accommodate?
Well, and that is the argument. It's like, well,
Yeah.
with Pine Grove, you end up chopping through an area that now all the neighbors can't figure out who's in which district. Whereas in Fiddletown, if you're north of a certain line, it's a simpler division, than splitting Pine Grove into 3 different districts, right?
And 3 is still light.
3 is way light. We need to add back into 3. And the only way to get more for 3 would be to come back down into Pine Grove. Or coming below and sending it closer down to Plymouth.
Yeah.
And when you go
exactly.
closer down to Plymouth, there's not a lot of population in there. That's very sparsely populated.
Right, it makes it very hard to,
Yeah,
collect that many bodies.
right. Yeah, that's why, like I said, most of my maps have that same division line.
Mine too.
Yeah, and yeah, it's not an easy one.
What's the number differential?
District 3 is 6,994. District 5 is 7,624.
Basically, we have to swap 300 for each one to get them about right.
Which means going down almost into Brook Ranch.
Mm-hmm. Which to me makes
Probably
less
even more
sense
so.
than upcountry above Fiddletown being part of 3 than having District 3 drop all the way down to Plymouth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hardly upcountry. Which District 3 is supposedly upcountry.
Right. Right. There's definitely a line in there.
Can we do a lot line adjustment with El Dorado County?
There you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Annex some of El Dorado
Holds that
County
river.
already.
It's getting late. Oh, God.
Well, there's always that fallback position of doing it by zip codes and adding 3 supervisors.
Yeah. Yeah, see, that's if you put the Fiddletown up into upcountry, which I think we've seen before that caused grief for others.
Mm-hmm.
And that just reversed the problem from one district to the other. That line is a really hard one. Yeah, oh yeah, it's a little easier to read if we use those ones. Yeah, so we're plus 366 and minus 384, so we're way out of whack.
Yeah.
So with this configuration, I would argue, I mean, unless you're going to really go in and slide the whole map around, that the Fiddletown problem, I think that's as close as that's as close as I could get. Really? Not this one, the way it was originally. That line that cuts the eastern side of Fiddletown and puts it in District 3. Yeah. Yeah. And you can imagine doing this in other spots too, right? Like, so if you start doing in Pine Grove, it's this on steroids. You move one over and it's because the lines are more muddled there. So
Back up to the Fiddletown one, is the dark portion is currently in District 5?
Oh, they're both in District 5 right now. There's a split that runs right up the north boundary with El Dorado that goes way up into upcountry with District 5.
I think Roseland put it back into District 3, actually.
He put it back the way the map was originally.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that is now. But the reason it wasn't a problem in the current map is because the way the District 5 went all the way up into upcountry and split up all those other communities up there that we were having issues with earlier on, and we all kind of agreed that they should be kept whole.
Okay.
So,
Group tweak is, at 8 o'clock at night. Might be,
might be a heavy lift, right?
might be a heavy lift. At least it is for me.
Yeah. So that's why I was talking about earlier is, so that the Fiddletown is an issue. And with the way I've been mapping, I don't know that I can solve it. The theory of the maps I've been working from, because almost all my maps have that. So, but the question is that one gonna hold us up? Or, you know, each map is gonna have its set of COIs that are split, and we can talk about each one.
Yeah, well, we've always talked, I think, or at least casually and implied, that the perfect COI doesn't exist.
Sure.
And, we'd have to make a decision, like, which I commented under my breath on one of those maps, well, those overlaps are insignificant, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
We're
a lot of them
talking about 25 people or.
Yeah, or zero. Some of these census blocks actually have between 0 and 3 people in them. And when the overlap contains that, it's really not worth our time to worry about.
That's, if the overall configuration looks generally okay, I guess, I'm talking off the top of my head here. We need to actually look at the different COI issues and then make a decision on that map, whether that COI issue is an issue or not.
Right.
Whether that overlap is an issue. If it's not, then we uncheck it and move on to the next one.
Well, and actually, at this point, we're gonna have to be annotating that so we can document it.
Yes.
So, I'm back to where I think I was before. Everybody goes back to their maps, does the adjustments as best they can, and then that's where we start next week, by making some comparisons one to the other and just kind of sallying our way forth that way. If that's agreeable, makes sense?
You want to do that by Monday?
Monday.
Because we got a holiday week. Well, it's not really a holiday weekend, but it is for me. I got trick-or-treaters coming my way.
I don't think you're gonna be able to get Rosalind to come in on the weekend.
Yeah, I don't think
that's happening. Well, we could ask county council though.
You know, I can't do anything between now and Monday. This is it for me. Well, with Ann and you. That's the only one I've been working, that's the only one I've worked on. Yeah, be my guest.
So we meet Monday, same time, same place.
I don't think you're being picked up on your mic.
Pardon?
I don't think you're being picked.
I got it.
You got it? Oh, good, good. I just wasn't hearing it.
Yeah, I can't swallow it any further, Andy. I'm leaning. Okay. Any other items for the good of the order? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.